Good evening. Thanks very much for joining us on India Business Hour. I'm Shireen Bhan. The headlines that we're tracking for you tonight. After 45 turbulent days in office, British Prime Minister Liz Truss announces her resignation, becomes the shortest-serving Prime Minister in British history. Rishi Sunak is among the probables to succeed her, even as opposition parties call for an election. Rupee hits a new low as the dollar strength continues to rattle currencies across the world, but the RBI steps in to stem the decline, sparking a late recovery. The Japanese yen weakens against the dollar to levels not seen in more than 3 decades. Asian Paints misses estimates in Q2. The management says demand was subdued due to an extended monsoon. Axis Bank beats expectations with a 30% rise in income, 70% rise in profits. Asset quality also improves sequentially. Tesla's third-quarter revenue misses estimates on Wall Street amidst fears of a slowing demand, but tech giant IBM beats estimates, raises the forecast for full-year revenue growth. In a bid to tame the rising cost of pulses, the government hints at new rules to crack down on hoarding. The Consumer Affairs Secretary says companies that import pulses are likely to be mandated to release the stock in the market within a month. That's a CNBC-TV18 exclusive. Supreme Court rules that if charitable trusts have a profit motive, they cannot claim income tax exemption, but experts say the verdict could open the door for differences in interpretation and possibly even more litigation. As the holiday season kicks off, Indian travelers plan overseas trips despite soaring airfares, but foreign tourist arrivals into India remain below expectations. A special report on what's hurting inbound travel coming up. Well, the big story, Liz Truss has resigned as the Prime Minister of UK only 45 days after being in office, making her the shortest-serving Prime Minister in the history of the United Kingdom. Now, her resignation comes after weeks of turbulence in which her mini-budget roiled the markets, 2 ministers left their offices, and her acceptability took a beating. In her address, Truss said that she couldn't deliver the mandate on which she was elected by the Conservative Party. Her resignation comes only a day after she told Parliament that she was a fighter and not a quitter. The opposition parties have called for a general election.
Mr. Speaker, I am a fighter and not a quitter. I have acted in the national interest to make sure that we have economic stability. I recognise, though, given the situation, I cannot deliver the mandate on which I was elected by the Conservative Party. I have therefore spoken to His Majesty the King to notify him that I am resigning as leader of the Conservative Party.
Well, that is Liz Truss announcing her resignation just a short while ago. Sanjay Surya, our colleague, joins us now from London. Sanjay, a complete debacle. There is no other way to describe what has happened in the UK. And finally, with this climax of Liz Truss submitting her resignation just hours ago, just absolute debacle.
So Liz Truss did have to bow to the inevitable. It had become unsustainable for her to attempt to cling on to the position of Prime Minister, even though she told Parliament that she is a fighter. But she really was fighting for her position, not quite for the party, and she was fighting the party, in fact. That party has risen in almost complete rebellion against her. A number of MPs came out in the open and publicly demanded she go, and the number of others who did not do so were expressing their views more directly to Sir Graham Reddy, the chairman of the 1922 committee, which runs the parliamentary affairs of the Conservative Party. Liz Truss had announced through her campaign policies that could never have been implemented. They simply were not realistic, and they went to pieces on contact with reality, and that came by way of that mini budget. Those policies and the level of debt that she was going to take on could never have been handled by the government. The question now is, who next? Whoever next, it won't be another 6 weeks, 8 weeks of process and one round after another. Liz Truss has said that in a week we should have a replacement. Graham Reddy will work out what the process should be. If it is a vote, decisive vote among MPs, it's advantage Rishi Sunak. If not, it may be advantage Boris Johnson. If it goes to the party members, though penny mordaunt is a very serious factor in the reckoning.
Well, likely contenders there, Penny Mordaunt, Rishi Sunak. Let's see what happens. The opposition calling for an election. Sanjay Suri, thanks very much. This, of course, is a developing story. Now, back home, the rupee went on a roller coaster ride today. The currency opened at a new low against the dollar, then fell rapidly in early trade. Sources say the RBI is likely to have intervened in late trade, after which we saw a dramatic recovery. In fact, the rupee's recovery today was the biggest that we've seen in the last year. But as things stand, $1 US costs just under 83 rupees. The rupee is not alone. Strength in the US dollar is rattling currencies across the world. The Japanese yen falling to a 3-decade low, the Korean won, the Malaysian ringgit, and almost all major currencies in Asia are struggling against the greenback. Lata joins us now with the money market action. Dramatic recovery today, Lata, for the rupee. What are you hearing?
Well, actually, it's a huge U-turn that we have seen. Where did we start at 83, almost 83.01? Fell as much as 83.30 thereabouts, 83.28 to be precise, and another 50 pice move on the other side to 82.80. Now, global backdrop hasn't changed much. It is still against emerging market currencies, and other Asian currencies are still weak, and US yields are still high, dollar is still high. What clearly is changing is the flow. Yesterday, we spoke about this one foreign bank which seemed to have had a large buy order for dollars. Now, once that ebbs, then that also takes away a bit of the pressure on the dollar. In addition, banks which knew of this order and expected RBI to come in had also taken positions, at 82.30, 82.50. All of them got hurt and nobody wanted to risk it now. The crux of the matter is it's a very illiquid market. And so even one bank or two bank buy orders can swing the market both ways. And, well, the Reserve Bank was there unexpectedly. The Reserve Bank has this ability to perhaps catch the market napping. Yesterday, a big order came in. They didn't want to stay in the way. They ensured that the buyer bought the dollar expensive. And today, when the wind was somewhat on their side, with not too many buy orders, they just came in and rammed it down, or so it looks, offered a considerable amount at 83.20, and took the dollar below the 83 mark. It's an illiquid market. So, the Reserve Bank picks and chooses the days that it wants to intervene with minimal expense of reserves to maximum impact.
Lata, many thanks. Well, we did see the maximum impact of the RBI today in the rupees move. Thanks very much for joining us. Well, what we saw happen in the currency market seemed to have rubbed off on equities as well. The late rebound did help the Sensex and the Nifty close in the green. The Sensex gaining nearly 100 points. The Nifty gained over 50 points. Bank stocks, though, declined in trade along with mid-caps. Both those indices closing in the red today. We are in the midst of earnings season. Key earnings today. Asian Paints missing estimates on most counts. Volume growth was just over 10%, which was below estimates of nearly 15% growth. Margins have also declined sequentially, and the management has said an extended monsoon impacted demand in Q2. Axis Bank, though, beat estimates in Q2 with a 70% jump in profit, 30% rise in net interest income. Asset quality also improving sequentially, with both net and gross NPAs declining. Tech giant IBM has delivered better than expected earnings in Q3. Revenues jumped 6%, coming in at over $14 billion, surpassing estimates of $13.5 billion. The union government is likely to issue fresh guidelines that will now make it mandatory to push out pulses into the market within a month of imports. The move is being aimed at curbing the rise in prices and crack down on hoarding. Here's the Consumer Affairs Secretary speaking with my colleague Timsy Jaipuria exclusively.
By facilitating imports in a hassle-free manner, we are ensuring the availability of stocks in the market, thereby impacting the prices, and I'm sure prices will not go up. At the moment, we are watching the import position in custom bonded warehouses and other domestic warehouses of importers. And if we see a hoarding tendency, we will impose a provision that beyond this number of days you cannot hold.
What could be the proper guideline, if at all government gets down to issuing such a guideline?
I mean, it will depend on the situation. We could say 30 days, 45 days, depending on how much is available, what is the deficiency in the market.
That is the Consumer Affairs Secretary saying that the government is considering possible intervention. A decision, though, has not been taken just yet. Industry is opposing the government's possible imposition at a time of imposing a time limit on when they have to release the imports into the market. As things currently stand, companies have to comply with a stock limit on how much they can hold. And now, as we just heard, that the government is hinting at a possible time limit. Manisha is joining us now with the details. Manisha, industry unhappy with the possibility of a time limit being imposed?
Well, the pulses as a sector clearly has not a positive response to what the Consumer Affairs Secretary spoke about today on putting in a timeline when it comes to selling or offloading the stock that has been imported. One, the trade feels that the importers will actually start curbing imports because you can't import a lot and then try and sell it at whatever prices and not profitable prices into the market. Two, they believe that since the pulses prices are the only ones within the agriculture sector which haven't increased so much as compared to last year, there isn't really something that needs to be done in this way. Third, they believe that this is just a conversation right now, and before a notification is issued or a more concrete step is taken, the ministries would talk to stakeholders and various pulses associations as well. The fourth point is that when you look at the pulses buffer stock with the government, that is much higher than the required norm of 2.3 million tons. The government holds 4.3 million tons right now, and within this as well, 3.1 million tons is just chana. So there is enough availability of chana and various other pulses as well. The other thing that the markets look at is that there is enough availability of other pulses in the global markets as well. India usually imports 2 to 2.5 million tons per annum of pulses every year, and the only concern that the trade sees is in case of tuar, and that too in the next year. In the near future, especially for the festival as a season, there doesn't really seem to be a concern on availability or affordability.
Manisha, many thanks. We'll have to wait to see if the government does go ahead with that possibility. Now, the union government is not going to roll back its decision on steel export duty as things currently stand. Sources telling CNBC-TV18 the government does not want to create policy uncertainty by tweaking the regulation often. The current demand-supply situation of steel is under review. A decision will be taken in due course. The government imposed a 15% export duty on finished steel products in May this year. Reuters says that market regulator SEBI has approved the government's proposal to convert its pending dues into equity. The government may end up owning over 30% stake in the telecom company. The government will convert dues into equity when the stock price... That decision on when the government will convert is yet to be taken. This, remember, has been a long pending decision. The government had cleared this proposal in January of this year, but we still don't know when the actual conversion will take place. Back to earnings. Tata Consumer Products reported a 22% increase in net profit. Revenues rose nearly 11%, but EBITDA growth was muted at just 5%. NBFC player Bajaj Finance has met estimates in Q2. AUM growth up 30% year-on-year, making it the best in 11 quarters. New loans up 6.8%, while the customer base has risen by over 19% year-on-year. Asset quality has improved, with both NPAs seeing a sequential decline. Now, in a significant ruling, the Supreme Court has held that charitable trusts that are profit-oriented cannot seek any exemption from income tax. This ruling is likely to have wide-ranging ramifications. Ashmit joins us now to explain the court's orders and their significance. Ashmit.
The legislature has always encouraged such charitable trusts by giving them exemptions from paying income tax since as early as 1886. Now, the Modern Income Tax Act also provides for similar benefits. However, it has been a decades-long struggle for the tax department to check misuse of exemptions. Now, this debate climaxed in the Supreme Court, with the court hearing 110 applications by the tax department against various High Court orders. The RT department had challenged various High Court orders that held that charities can undertake business and commercial activities and still go ahead and claim tax exemption. Now, under the Modern IT Act, Section 215 defines what qualifies as a charitable purpose. Trusts engaged in relief for poor, education, medical relief, and general public utilities qualify as charitable. Now, I'd lay emphasis on GPUs, or general public utilities. The question before the Supreme Court was to decide on what are the conditions under which these general public utilities, or GPUs, can in fact be exempt. But what are these GPUs? Well, examples would be municipal corporations, state cricket associations, regulatory bodies like the ICAI, which is the governing body for chartered accountants, trade associations, as well as government not-for-profit bodies like the National Internet Exchange can also be GPUs. Now, Section 215 also declares that a charity is not a GPU if it does any commercial or business activity or charges any fees or levies. It further clarifies that commercial activities can be allowed if done to advance the objective of that charity It also clarifies that revenue from these commercial operations should not exceed 20%. So what is the Supreme Court judgment? Well, in broad terms, Supreme Court has clarified that carrying out commercial activities or levying fees will bar the charitable trust from claiming exemptions. Supreme Court has held that revenue or fees beyond nominal levels required to sustain will invite the scrutiny of the tax department. So what will be the implications? Well, for statutory corporations like government bodies performing functions like water supply, housing, sewage treatment, the Supreme Court has held that they perform a public function and therefore can claim this exemption. What about statutory regulators like the ICAI, the governing body for chartered accountants? Here, the Supreme Court has held that only activities like prescribing standards, setting curriculum and certification will qualify. Any further activities like coaching classes or registration fees would be commercial and therefore not eligible for exemption. For trade bodies, Supreme Court clarifies that commercial activities beyond advocacy may be impermissible. Similarly, for non-statutory bodies like the National Internet Exchange of India, they can claim exemption for performing public functions. The state cricket associations, however, could be in a spot of bother. Supreme Court held that they receive huge proceeds from the sale of media rights from BCCI. Supreme Court also recorded that they own stadiums. They received entry fees from fans, sponsorships, as well as ad revenue. In fact, the Supreme Court has asked the tax department to review their accounts for checking for eligibility. Now, it would be interesting to see if this judgment has any bearing on the BCCI, which is also seeking similar tax exemptions. But many experts are wondering if this judgment has raised more questions than answers, and if the Supreme Court judgment could lead to differences in interpretation and possibly even greater litigation.
If I look at the two judgments together, it is quite likely that the tax authorities on a going forward are going to say that educational universities, that hospitals will have to be providing services at or just a portion above cost and nothing more than that. They can't be making profit. And then the Supreme Court judgment is quite more lucid, unequivocal, to say that if these activities carry on, activities only for, they make profits only for the principal activities for which they have been set up, no issues. But again, those profits should be nominal in nature. They should not be making huge profits.
Well, that is Dinesh Kanabar on the implications of the two Supreme Court orders on charitable trusts. Time for us to head into a break, but up next, as the holiday season kicks off, Indian travellers are going overseas despite soaring airfares, but foreign tourist arrivals into India remain below expectations. A special report on what's hurting inbound travel up ahead.